Hello my little learners, you can call me Lovegood and I hope you enjoyed this video. Here are just a few things before we get started. Today I'm presenting you with Chapter 7 of How to Raise a Child Nemesis, titled Several Discoveries and a Friend, by sabertoothhousecat on AO3. But anyways, thank you for tuning in to listen to me. As always, tags are in the description as well as warnings. But that's enough of my rambles and jambles, and let's get right into the fic. This is the summary. Summary: 2 people who get bullied a lot walk into a martial arts class. Friendship ensues. Also, Izuku sleuths. Let's go right into the fic. It was a few weeks after Midoriya's 10th birthday that All For One discovered he was getting bullied at school. He should have noticed sooner, probably, given the amount of time he spent with the boy against his will, and given the contents of the parent-teacher conference. But Midoriya was extremely good at talking the bruises away, and Kurogiri hadn't seen anything amiss when picking him up, so All For One easily wrote it off as general clumsiness and/or idiocy. But then he came home with a burn mark on his cheek. It was just chance that All For One saw it. He happened to walk through the bar at the same moment Kurogiri portaled Midoriya home, but that chance was all he needed to stop short, noticing the ash smudged over his skin and the way his continually unruly hair was somehow even more misshapen than usual. "What happened?" he asked. "Huh?" Midoriya said. His hand flew to his cheek the second after, eyes widening, and he said, "Oh, it was just this experiment we did in science today. Got a little crazy." "Don't lie to me," All For One snapped, sweeping across the room to take a look. He took Midoriya's chin and turned his face slightly to the side so he could see his cheek better. It definitely wasn't more than a second-degree burn, which All For One could heal in seconds, but it was a burn nonetheless, the skin rough and peeling. "Who did this?" he asked, healing it. Midoriya blinked at him, eyes very wide. "Izuku-kun." "It was just this kid at school," Midoriya said, pushing him away. "It's not a big deal, I promise. They were just messing around." "Don't make groundless promises," All For One warned. Midoriya's nose wrinkled up. "Okay, it's a little bit of a deal, like half of a big deal, but I'm fine, see?" He pointed to his newly healed cheek. "All gone." "What would you do if I hadn't noticed?" All For One demanded. "What then? What if it had gotten infected?" He didn't know why he cared, to be honest, but he developed not an affection for Midoriya, but yes, a reluctant fondness, and this was flaring up something protective in him he hadn't seen since Yuichi. Midoriya listed on his fingers. "Run cool water over it, spread burn cream on it, and bandage it. Change the bandages twice every day." And that was how All For One found out this was, in fact, a recurring issue, and he had just been blind to it earlier. He took a deep inhale, released a long exhale. "Who?" "Doesn't matter," Midoriya mumbled. "I don't want to get people in trouble." All For One had been contemplating doing things much worse than getting people in trouble, but fine. "Martial arts classes. You're going to start taking them. Lots of them. On top of the coding classes." Midoriya nodded vigorously, probably glad to have dodged the question of who was beating him up at school. All For One had other ways of finding this out, of course, but for now he'd let Midoriya keep his secrets. If not for anything else, then just to prove to himself that he was not getting attached to a random 10-year-old who was honestly more of a nuisance than a source of joy or support. "Great," Midoriya said, looking delighted at the idea. "Yes, good, awesome. When do I start?" Perhaps All For One should have been suspicious of his quick acceptance of his plan, but he was busy using a quirk to scan for other hidden injuries. Midoriya had a bruise on his shin and a skinned elbow, but otherwise seemed fine. God damn it, maybe he was going soft. Since his 10th birthday, Izuku had been trying to find other ways to be a vigilante without actually getting into fights since his martial arts classes had only just begun, and until he actually knew how to defend himself, facing off against villains seemed like a bad idea. Of course, he could always do what he'd been doing the entire time and call other heroes to help, and recently he'd also found out that he could use his credit card to anonymously purchase custom gear for active heroes and mail it to them. Several heroes had already begun using the improvements, but he began to wonder if there was some other way for him to level up his abilities, such as sleuthing through not Oji-san's stuff for the second time. This time he set himself up for better success. He waited until not Oji-san was on a work trip and made a huge pancake mess in the kitchen for Kurogiri to clean up, and then slid right into not Oji-san's office. His coding teacher had told him that there was a way to install viruses onto people's computers that would make some sort of link from their computer to Izuku's computer so he could go through things on his own time. Izuku had tried very hard to teach himself how to do this and had learned quickly that his level of skill was just not there yet. So instead, he climbed up into Not Oji-san's swivel chair and went through all the papers on his desk. Not Oji-san was old-fashioned and liked having information in hard copies, lest something went awry with his computer, which, Izuku had to admit, was wise, given that Izuku was plotting to sabotage the computer at some point. He went through the papers, carefully sounding out words he didn't know. Most of it seemed like boring personal stuff. He took pictures with his phone of stuff that seemed important but not urgent. He could parcel that out later. When he was nearing the point that Kurogiri was probably almost done with the kitchen, he slipped off the chair again, disappointed but pleased that he could try this again. On the way to the door, a flash of paper sticking out of a binder on one of the shelves caught his eye. He hesitated, glancing at the door. He could hear Kurogiri banging pots and pans together, so he figured he had a moment. Careful, he tipped the binder down and flipped it open. Aha! This was more of what he was looking for. Plans for a sketchy business meetup of some kind. It looked like maybe Not Oji-san was planning on blackmailing an important-looking man into doing some work for him. Izuku squinted at the letters, trying to make out the complicated vocabulary, before giving up and just taking pictures of all the papers that looked important. He put the binder back together exactly as it had been and replaced it on the shelf. On soft feet, he slipped out of the office, past Kurogiri, and up into his room. And then he settled down to pass out every scrap of information he could glean from the papers he'd found. Izuku wouldn't really consider himself a big fan of the martial arts classes. He loved the coding classes, but the martial arts stuff was more difficult than fun, and he felt like it was taking him longer to learn than it should have been. Not only that, but he'd started to find that he really didn't enjoy punching people, so he had also begun to feel torn about whether or not someone could be a hero if they were A, quirkless, and B, didn't really enjoy fighting that much anyway. Ka-chan, he knew, got a sort of thrill from punching people, because it made him feel better than them. It didn't make Izuku feel better than anyone. Really, it made him feel bad for punching people in the first place. He thought that maybe if someone was in danger, like that one kid he'd stepped in front of when Ka-chan was being mean, then he might enjoy punching people more, but he didn't even want to enjoy it. This was a dilemma. But if Izuku had learned anything from being the kidnappee/adopted child of the villain to end all villains, it was that sometimes asking for things would get good results. After school, when Kurogiri dropped him off at his dojo, he went right up to Sensei, a stern-faced woman with a cool flower-making quirk, and said, "I really don't like punching people." Sensei blinked at him. He waited for the rewards of such a statement to appear. "Well, good," Sensei said. "You're not supposed to enjoy it. Now get on the mat and start stretching." Okay, so that attempt had not been as successful as he'd predicted. He went to the mat and started stretching, contemplating how better to express his needs. Clearly, he needed an actual question. But what was his question? How can I stop punching people? An unfamiliar voice said something at the front. Izuku looked over, curious, and saw a tall man with slicked-back purple hair talking to Sensei, who was handing over some paperwork. Izuku remembered that paperwork. Kurogiri had done it for him. The tall man walked over to the counter to fill out the papers, revealing a lanky, purple-haired boy behind him, who was standing with his arms crossed and staring at the floor. He didn't really seem like he wanted to be here. Neither did Izuku, so it was relatable. Izuku wished his hearing was a little better so he could listen to what the tall man, probably the boy's father, was saying to Sensei, but his hearing was not a little better, so he just continued stretching. Probably, not Oji-san had a file on him, and he could use that to investigate later. Or not, that seemed slightly immoral. Sensei said something to the boy and passed him a gi. She gestured at the mat. The boy sent his father a dark glare, kicked his shoes off, and disappeared to change. When he emerged, tightening his belt, which Izuku could see from the mat was terribly mistied, he looked more uncomfortable than ever. He cast his father another look, bowed at the mat, and stepped onto it. Izuku waved. One of the boy's eyes had a big bruise around it. Izuku had had many a black eye in his life, and he pursed his lips in sympathy. It was a bad idea to comment on it, he had decided. "Your belt," he said instead, "is an abomination. I'll show you." The boy frowned at him and sat down a few feet away. Izuku demonstrated how to tie it, explaining every step and trying not to go on a random tangent. The boy copied him and came out with something still horribly mangled, but at least properly tied. Izuku smiled at him. He looked away.
"My name's Midoriya Izuku,"
Izuku said,
"but people just call me Izuku."
Very few people actually called him Izuku. The list was limited to his mother, Mitsuki, Kurigiri, another purple-haired boy.
"Shinso Otoshi,"
the boy said to the floor.
"Do you prefer Shinso or Otoshi?"
The boy shrugged. Izuku had a feeling this friendship was not going to come easily, but Izuku's number of friends was limited to one, and that one was Kachan, who some might say didn't even count, so he was determined to do this right.
"Shinso, then."
"Hitoshi's fine," the boy said.
"Hitoshi, then."
The rest of the class started to file in. Izuku waved at them. They ignored him and went to stretch on an entirely different part of the mat, and Izuku continued his attempts at learning who Hitoshi was. Most people stopped at wanting to be friends with him the moment the word quirkless came out, so he avoided that topic altogether. Hitoshi's dad left the building. Izuku told Hitoshi as much. Hitoshi shrugged. Izuku decided he really liked Hitoshi, and that they were destined to be the closest friends of all time, perhaps even closer than Izuku and Kachan, if such a thing was possible. They started class, and Izuku avoided punching anything for as long as physically possible. Hitoshi was actually halfway decent and stuff, which was good because he was still a white belt, and everyone else in the class had already moved past that one. After class, Hitoshi disappeared to change again, and Izuku made his second attempt at talking to Sensei about his big punching issue. He tried for more of a direct angle this time.
"I don't want to punch people,"
he said. She peered down her long nose at him. Her grey hair was up in a bun, and it made the whole look all the more intimidating. Izuku stood his ground. He lived with the villain to end all villains. Sensei didn't scare him. Now for the question.
"Is there a different martial arts style I should be learning?"
Sensei sighed like Izuku tired her. "Yes, there are many martial arts styles. You may be more interested in Aikido, perhaps. Or Judo?" These were a lot of words.
"I'll research this on my own,"
Izuku said, nodding seriously.
"Can you teach me other styles, or just this one?"
"I can help with a few others, and we have other teachers here that can help you with more. It depends on the styles you want to learn." Izuku nodded slowly.
"Yes, good. Excellent."
She sighed again. Izuku was a triumph. Yes, a triumph. The papers Izuku had found in Not Oji-san's office were indeed very important and very urgent. At first, Izuku had thought Not Oji-san was just planning to blackmail some person into doing something for him, but it turned out to be much bigger than that, including abducting one of the highest members of the Hero Public Safety Commission, which Izuku didn't really know anything about, but seemed important because it had the word hero in it, and forcing him to give up big information. The operation was planned for 2 weeks from now. Izuku needed to get Hiro involved as soon as possible, but he couldn't figure out how to do it without tipping Not Oji-san off that someone had gone through his stuff. Such a discovery would definitely point right back at Izuku. So, if he couldn't get the heroes involved, then the next option was to just get himself involved and call heroes in for backup on the day of, after he had already ruined a good portion of the undertaking. The problem was, Izuku didn't feel like he'd had sufficient enough martial arts training for him to take down the entire operation or even make a dent in it. Knowing how to punch the air and not fall over was not the same as actually punching someone. He'd have to be smart, and he was smart. His most recent school project on the weather cycle had gotten a 30 out of 30. But this was more than that. He'd have to be sneaky and careful. If he slept up, he could get caught. And maybe then Not Oji-san would take away his Sir Nightai figurines or something. It seemed unlikely, but possible. He stayed up later than he should have researching. The blankets, now unfortunately Mr. themed instead of All Might, pulled up over his head and his laptop to keep the light from escaping. He read everything he could on the subject, the abductee, who Not Oji-san had hired, the location, all the way in Tokyo, until his eyelids grew heavy and slipped closed without permission. He told himself he'd close them for just 1 minute and then get back to it, but exhaustion took him quickly and he slumped back against his headboard, fast asleep. When his, no longer All Might themed, now Edshot, alarm went off the next morning, he felt everything click into place in his mind.
he had a plan.
Alrighty, my little learners, that's a wrap of this one. So that was cool. Shinso is now officially joining the fic, and we have all for one figuring out about the bullying, Izuku not wanting to punch people. I love this. Amazing chapter as always. So my little learners, this is a little reminder you might have something you need to check. I hope you will have a fantastic time wherever and whenever you may be. Day, night, dusk, dawn, low tide, high tide, whatever it is for you. You can call me Lovegood, and that was Chapter 7 of How to Raise a Child Nemesis, titled Several Discoveries and a Friend by sabertoothhousecat on AO3. Again, the link to this fic will be in the pinned comment by me in this video, and tags are in the description as well as warnings. Bye, little learners.